Chapter 145. Shizun has a mealtime companion now. The busy harvest season ended with the turning colors of the leaves. The villagers of Yuliang village prepared an assortment of parcels, large and small, packed full of jerky, rice cakes, spices, and homespun cloth. They thrust these parcels into Chu Wanning and Moran's arms. Sisheng Peak did not lack for food or goods, but these were heartfelt gifts. To reject them would be rude. Thus, the two accepted the parcels and helped the village chief fill the saddlebags. Linger was there too, hugging a bamboo basket covered in a porcelain-patterned cloth. A lifted corner revealed fresh, steamed flatbreads and a dozen green-shelled hard-boiled eggs. She paused in front of Moran's horse, her bright black eyes unable to meet his gaze. She wanted to look at him, but the memory of her tipsy confession of the other night was too mortifying. After some hesitant shuffling, she eventually came over, raising the basket above her head, and said to the handsome man seated astride the horse, "Mo Tianjun, I made these just this morning, for you and Chu Tianjun to eat on the road." Moran hesitated, unsure of her intentions. He didn't know whether to accept or decline. Linger understood his misgivings. She lifted her head. Despite the blush on her face, there was stubbornness and some hurt in her gaze. She might have tried everything to win the affection of this extraordinary Tianjun, but she wasn't one of those girls with no dignity who would continue clinging on after a clear rejection. "Relax, Tianjun," she said. "Linger doesn't mean anything by it. I just want to thank Tianjun for taking care of Yuliang village these last couple weeks." Only then did Moran take the basket. From his seat atop his horse, he looked down and replied sincerely, "Many thanks, miss." "Tianjun is most welcome." When he saw that she was sensible about things, he felt more friendly toward her. After a pause, he asked, "Do you have any plans for the future, miss?" "Why does Tianjun ask?" "I just think you don't seem like a girl who wants to live in a small village for long." Linger smiled, the fight coming back to her eyes. "I want to visit the upper cultivation realm. I hear Rufeng sect's leader is kind and willing to lend a hand to ambitious people of little means. As long as those of us from the lower cultivation realm can find work in Linyi, they won't chase us off. My needlework is decent, and I also know how to cook. I should be able to get by." Of course, she didn't say the most important part out loud. Out of the 10 great sects, Rufeng sect had the most disciples, and its domain stretched across a vast territory, totaling 72 cities of varying size. Moreover, Linyi was well known as a cultivator's hub. Out of 10 people on its streets, 5 would be cultivators. But Chu Wanning hadn't guessed her intentions. When he heard she was headed to Linyi, his brows knitted slightly. "Things at Rufeng sect aren't as simple as you might think. If Miss only wants to settle in the upper cultivation realm, perhaps consider Yangzhou's Rainbow Isle instead." "It's important to make a living in Yangzhou. Everything is too expensive," Linger said. "Tianjun's advice is appreciated, but Linger has already thought it over." She'd made her stance clear. Chu Wanning knew it would be futile to press, so he let it go. The two set off on their horses, with their saddlebags stuffed to bursting. As they passed by Butterfly Town, Chu Wanning took a close look at the barrier there. Fortunately, the spiritual current was plentiful, and everything remained stable. They continued riding, and were back at Sisheng Peak by noon. Chu Wanning went off to brief Shu Chengyong on how things had gone. Moran, left at loose ends, strolled about idly. As he neared Naihe Bridge, he encountered someone scrubbing the stone lions on the bridge's columns, who had been punished with manual labor. Not wishing to embarrass the offender, Moran decided to take another route. Yet, just as he was turning around, he heard a familiar voice call out from the distance, "Aran." Upon closer inspection, the one scrubbing the lions was Shimei. Moran was momentarily taken aback, feeling somewhat strange. For one, it was odd to find someone as rule-abiding as Shimei getting punished. For another, there was Shimei's current appearance. Even though it had been some time since Moran had been introduced to this fully grown version of Shimei, he hadn't gotten used to it. Instead, Moran found Shimei's face and figure increasingly unfamiliar as time went on. He almost hadn't recognized him at first glance just now. "What are you doing here? Got in trouble?" Moran asked as he walked over. Shimei looked a little abashed. Together with the young master." "Meng?" Moran paused for a moment, then chuckled. That would explain it. It was true that Chu Wanning was always getting himself into trouble. "What did he drag you into this time?" He said he wanted to go to the forbidden grounds in the mountain backwoods, to catch a few monsters for training. Moran's eyebrows rose. He ended up almost stabbing apart the crack in the barrier Shizun sealed before he left. Moran didn't know if he should laugh or cry. Does he think monsters are something he can catch and keep, like cats and dogs? And you! Don't just play along with him when he's messing around. Why didn't you try to talk him out of it? Shimei sighed in exasperation. Of course I tried to talk him out of it. It was no use. I was afraid it'd be dangerous, so I had to go with him. Never mind, forget it. At least nothing really terrible happened. What about you, Aran? You and Shizun went to Yuliang village to help with the harvest a while back, right? How was it? Everything go smoothly? Yeah, not too bad. The two made small talk for a time. After bidding farewell to Shimei, Moran walked alone down a small, tree-lined path in silence. With his newfound clarity, he could see in hindsight that his feelings toward Shimei had been more of an obsession, something he held onto out of habit, and not the love he'd thought. He'd once believed that because he looked at Shimei and thought him beautiful, thought him divinely ethereal, and thought his presence comforting, that this was desire. But it was not. People had always appreciated beautiful things. Moran appreciated Shimei's beauty, but a closer examination revealed that this appreciation carried no intimate desire. Moran enjoyed looking at Shimei the same way he enjoyed looking at the mountains cloaked with red leaves in the autumn and ponds crowded with lotus blossoms in the summer. But in all these years, he'd basically never had any inappropriate thoughts. He still cherished Shimei and cared for him as before, yet it was not the same. Moran finally understood what love was. He was no virtuous ascetic. His love was hot and steamy, accompanied by the urge to conquer, by the slap of flesh against flesh, by the rushing of blood and the spilling of fluids. He was a wolf that could appreciate the scent of wild roses. But wolves had fangs, and tastes to match. What he fed on was not grass or flowers, but blood and flesh. By dinner time, Chu Wanning had finally finished organizing the books in the second classics section of the library. He whined in exhaustion, sprawling over the table at Meng Hall, as he issued a steady stream of complaints. Even his usual favorite, deep-fried diced chicken with chili peppers couldn't cheer him up. As he played listlessly with his chopsticks, he spied Chu Wanning entering the dining hall. The sight finally gave him the energy to straighten up and call out, "Shizun!" Chu Wanning looked over and nodded. Moran sat beside Chu Wanning. He, Chu Wanning, and Shimei had always eaten as a trio. But today, when Chu Wanning walked in, Moran set about shifting all the plates and bowls around to make space at their table. "What are you doing?" Chu Wanning asked. Moran threw Chu Wanning a grin. He stood and waved to Chu Wanning. "Shizun, come sit here." Chu Wanning and Shimei gaped at him. They respected their Shizun certainly, but sharing a meal with him was another matter altogether. To eat with someone regularly required a certain level of familiarity and comfort, if only so one could tolerate the sounds of their dining partner emitted as they crunched on bones and smacked their lips, could ignore the ugly faces they made while eating, or any slips in table manners. Judging by the expressions on Meng and Shimei's face, it was plain that, though Chu Wanning's own etiquette was impeccable, they were not used to eating with him, and they didn't want to eat with him. To them, the occasional meal together with their Shizun was an obligatory social nicety, wherein both parties had to be on their best behavior. After those meals, their backs would often be stiff from tension, and they wouldn't have tasted a bite of what they ate. Chu Wanning understood this as well. He looked in surprise at Moran, then shook his head and made straight for his usual spot, carrying some simple vegetable dishes. He hadn't taken a meal in Mengpo Hall in 5 years. As Chu Wanning took his seat, he noticed a small ornamental copper plate nailed into the corner of the table. On it were engraved the words, "Reserved for Yuheng Elder." He stared at it for a long silent moment. What was wrong with Chu Chengyong? He sat gloomily, setting his wooden tray down with a heavy rattle. Yet, before he could take a bite, someone pulled back the wooden chair across from him, claiming a seat at the table reserved for Yuheng Elder. He placed his own tray right next to Chu Wanning's, pressed very close, almost touching. Chu Wanning looked up and at length said, "What are you doing here?" "It's too cramped over there," Moran said, grinning happily as he picked up his rice bowl. "So I've come to eat with Shizun." Chu Wanning glanced at where Meng and Shimei sat, baffled. In what world was it cramped? The two deserted by Moran wore similarly puzzled expressions as they peeked over at Chu Wanning and Moran's table. Shimei stared wordlessly. Meng mumbled, "Is that mutt out of his mind?" Moran had more pressing concerns. He'd stolen a glimpse at the dishes Chu Wanning had picked earlier, and it left him all twitchy. Chu Wanning was a picky eater, and particularly fussy about what he would and wouldn't touch. It was always this thing would upset his stomach, or that thing tasted gross. Moran couldn't imagine it was healthy. The nutritional imbalance was bound to become an issue once Chu Wanning got older. In the past, he couldn't have cared less what Chu Wanning ate, but things were different now. Aside from the fact that he liked Chu Wanning, Moran was also his disciple. It was his duty to see that his Shizun ate properly. But getting Chu Wanning to eat was an art in itself. In much the same way, one couldn't shove food into a cat's mouth and expect them to eat it. Brute force wouldn't work on this man if he had an aversion to something. An idea came to Moran. He plucked up a piece of braised pork, neither too fat nor too lean, and placed it in Chu Wanning's bowl. "Shizun, try this." Just as expected, Chu Wanning frowned. "I don't like pork belly," he said. "Take it away." Moran had prepared his strategy in advance. He said, smiling, "I hear it's done sweet Jiangnan style." "The way they cook meat in Jiangnan isn't like this," Chu Wanning said. "How would you know if you don't try it?" "I can tell from looking at it." "But the cook said it's Jiangnan style." Moran set the trap, waiting for the cat to wander in. He said, still smiling, "Mengpo Hall's cook is an experienced veteran. How can he be wrong? It must be that Shizun's been away from home for so long, you forgot what braised pork from your hometown looks like." "Absurd," Chu Wanning countered. "How could I possibly forget?" Moran ate a piece, making a show of carefully tasting it, then said earnestly, "I really think it's Shizun who's wrong. This meat is so sweet. Try a piece if you don't believe me." Chu Wanning was utterly oblivious to Moran's ulterior motive. Unconvinced, he picked up the braised pork and put it in his mouth. "What do you think?" Moran held back his laughter as he watched this big white cat take the bait. Chu Wanning frowned in earnest consideration. "It's not right. The taste of star anise is too strong. I'm going to go tell the cook. This isn't how you make Janan's braised pork." Wait. Moran hurriedly stopped him with a tug, feeling a little speechless. He hadn't thought this guy would take it so seriously. If Chu Wanning confronted the cook, wouldn't Moran be exposed? "Don't be hasty, Shizun. The cook must be busy right now. If Shizun says it's not right, then it definitely isn't. I'll let him know later. Let's just finish our meals first." Thinking this reasonable, Chu Wanning sat back down and returned to his meal. The crafty Moran moved through the next step of his dastardly plan. This time, he picked up a piece of fish. Chu Wanning's chopsticks faltered. "Shad fish?" "I don't want it. Take it away." "Why not?" "Don't like it." Moran grinned. "Because it has too many bones?" A long pause. Then, "No." "But whenever Shizun eats fish, it's always the ones without bones, or ones with larger bones that are easy to pick out. There's no way Shizun won't eat shad, because it's a small fish with lots of bones, right?" Moran laughed. He was all too familiar with Chu Wanning's soft spots and knew just how to poke them. Sure enough, Chu Wanning was fooled again. Irked, he said, "How ridiculous." Then he picked up the piece of shad Moran had placed in his bowl and ate it, clearly demonstrating that he certainly could eat fish with lots of bones. Just like that, Chu Wanning was unwittingly coaxed by Moran into eating far more variety than usual, with meat and greens from almost every dish. What would have been a quick meal dragged on for almost an hour, and still they weren't done. By the time they returned to their dishes and left, Meng and Mei were long gone, and only a handful of disciples remained inside Mengpo Hall. Moran walked Chu Wanning back to the Red Lotus Pavilion. The sun slowly sank below the horizon as they walked the tree-lined path, twilight spreading across the skies. The night breeze blew, and Moran strolled languidly with his hands clasped behind his head. All of a sudden, he smiled and said, "Shizun, what do you want?" "Nothing. I just wanted to call out to you." Chu Wanning eyed him. "Are you so stuffed with food that all the nonsense is coming out of you?" Moran's smile grew soft. "Yep, totally stuffed. So, Shizun, can I keep eating with you in the future?" Chu Wanning knew Moran didn't mean anything by it, but his heart couldn't help but skip a couple beats. Fortunately, his gaze remained steady. "Why, are you fighting with Chu Meng?" No, that's not it." Moran waved the notion aside with a laugh. "It's just that I haven't eaten in their company for so long. It's been 5 whole years. Sitting together again feels a little awkward. But if Shizun thinks I'll get in the way, I'll find another place to eat by myself tomorrow. It's fine." Chu Wanning didn't immediately reply. Of course Moran couldn't say, "I feel bad for you, always eating alone." And neither could he say, "I want to make sure you eat well." Moran didn't have to try to know neither approach would work. What he could do was feign vulnerability, confess how pitifully lonely he was, and say that he really wanted company. Chu Wanning had ever been kind-hearted. He definitely wouldn't deny him. Moran could see the resolve crumbling in Chu Wanning's eyes. All he needed was one last push. "But honestly, I really don't want to eat alone." "Why's that?" Moran lowered his soft lashes. His small smile was half genuine emotion, half playing it up to get Chu Wanning on the hook. "Shizun, someone who eats by themselves is simply satisfying hunger, don't you think?" He paused for a moment, and in the splendid red glow of dusk, brushed aside the loose strands of his hair blown against his forehead by the breeze. His dimples were deep as he gazed intently at the other man. When two people share both food and company, that's when you really taste the food, feel its warmth. That's called eating a meal. Chu Wanning watched him silently. Shizun, can I still eat with you tomorrow? There was no defense against the little wolf pup when he made an effort to be sincere. Moran had a stubbornness about him that stirred the heart as he said, Shizun, I spent 5 years all alone out there. Now that you're awake, I'll always eat with you. It'd feel weird without you, and I promise I won't eat rabbit heads or duck necks. A puff of laughter escaped toward the end, and he shamelessly tugged at Chu Wanning's sleeve. I'll eat tofu with scallions and sweet of Month's lotus roots with you. So, say yes, pretty please. Moran had actually been doing quite well up to that point, but with this, he accidentally reminded Chu Wanning of an unsettled score. A menacing expression settled over his face as he chuckled coldly. Fine by me, but you have to eat exactly what I do in the mornings. Sure, Moran agreed before he'd fully processed Chu Wanning's words. Wait, what do you eat in the morning? Savory tofu pudding. Chu Wanning replied cruelly. With seaweed? Moran blinked, flabbergasted. Was Chu Wanning seriously bringing up ancient grudges from the time they had hot pot together when he was Shiasini? Chu Wanning ground out through clenched teeth. And dried shrimp.